The transport ship glided through the darkness of space toward the massive station that orbited Viridian Prime. Inside the vessel, Ambassador Jiho Park sat quietly, reviewing his notes one final time. He had been preparing this presentation for 6 months. Everything needed to be perfect. The future of human expansion into the galaxy depended on the next few hours. Jiho was 53 years old, with gray streaks in his black hair and kind eyes that had witnessed both peace and war. He had 2 children back on Earth, both grown now, both proud of their father's work. He missed them terribly during these long diplomatic missions, but he believed in what he was doing. Humanity deserved a place among the stars, and he would make sure they got it through words, not weapons. Beside him sat Hyun Lee, his aide and security attaché. Hyun was younger, only 35, but his eyes were old. He had served in military intelligence during the colony wars before joining the diplomatic corps. Where Jiho saw opportunities for peace, Hyun saw potential threats. It made them a good team. The station loomed larger in the viewport. It was enormous, easily 50 kilometers across, built by dozens of alien civilizations working together. Thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds docked there every day. The Galactic Council had ruled from this station for over 2,000 years, maintaining order among the stars. Their ship docked with a soft clang. Jiho stood, straightening his formal diplomatic robes. They were simple but elegant, designed to show respect without appearing weak. Hyun checked his datapad one more time, then nodded. They were ready. The council chamber was breathtaking. The ceiling stretched up into darkness filled with holographic displays showing star systems across the galaxy. Representatives from 47 different species sat in tiered rows, their forms ranging from humanoid to completely alien. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others existed in sealed environmental suits filled with methane or liquid ammonia. At the center of it all sat High Arbiter Quill, the council's chief judge. Quill was a crystalline being, its body composed of living minerals that had formed over millennia. When it spoke, its voice resonated like music through the chamber. Quill was known to be fair, impartial, and ancient, beyond human understanding. But not everyone in the chamber was friendly. Counselor Vexthar represented the Dominion, a coalition of reptilian species that controlled vast regions of space. Vexthar's scaled face showed open contempt as Jiho approached the speaker's platform. The Dominion had opposed human membership in the council from the beginning, and they had blocked human proposals at every turn. Jiho began his presentation. He spoke clearly and calmly, explaining humanity's request. Earth wanted to establish new trade routes through several contested space sectors. These routes would benefit not just humanity, but dozens of other civilizations. They would reduce travel time, lower costs, and increase cooperation between species. He showed data, charts, projections. He had answers for every question, solutions for every concern. Several council members nodded along, clearly interested. The avian representatives from the nested world seemed particularly enthusiastic. Even some of the typically neutral species appeared to be swaying toward approval. Then Vexthar stood. The reptilian counselor's voice was cold and sharp. He accused humanity of hiding their true intentions. He claimed the trade routes were actually military corridors, designed to give Earth strategic advantages in future conflicts. He spoke of humanity's violent history, their wars, their aggression. Jiho remained calm. He had expected these accusations. He countered each point with facts and evidence. Humanity had been peaceful members of the galactic community for 15 years. They had honored every treaty, respected every border, contributed to every joint initiative. But then Vexthar produced his evidence. Holographic displays filled the chamber, showing what appeared to be classified human military documents. They detailed something called Project Omega and showed diagrams of warships, weapons systems, and fleet deployments. The images suggested humanity was building a massive military force in secret, hidden throughout their solar system. The chamber erupted in chaos. Species that had been ready to support humanity's proposal now looked alarmed. Others demanded explanations. The crystalline High Arbiter called for order, its musical voice cutting through the noise. Jiho stared at the displays, confused. He had never seen these documents before. They looked official, complete with proper formatting and security classifications, but something felt wrong. He glanced at Hyun, who was already working frantically on his datapad. Hyun's face went pale. He looked up at Jiho and mouthed two words. "They're fake." But before Hyun could announce this discovery, security forces entered the chamber. They were Dominion soldiers, heavily armed and moving with purpose. They surrounded Jiho and Hyun, blocking all exits. Vexthar's voice boomed across the chamber, declaring that the evidence was clear and that immediate action was required to protect the galaxy from human aggression. High Arbiter Quill called for a vote. The matter was too serious to delay. The Council would decide now whether humanity had violated galactic law by preparing for war while pretending to seek peace. Jiho tried to speak, but his microphone was cut off. Hyun tried to show his findings about the falsified documents, but the guards seized his datapad. They were pushed to the side of the chamber, forced to watch as the vote proceeded. One by one, the representatives cast their votes. Many abstained, unwilling to commit either way. But the Dominion had allies, species that feared human expansion or owed political debts to Vexthar. The votes against humanity began to pile up. The final tally appeared in the air above the chamber, guilty of conspiracy to wage war against the galactic community. Under ancient council law, the punishment for such crimes was death. Immediate death carried out in the chamber, broadcast to all member civilizations as a warning. Jiho felt strangely calm. He thought of his children, hoped they would understand that he had tried his best. He thought of Earth, wished he could have done more to protect it. And he thought of the irony that he was about to die for planning a war that didn't exist while the real war was probably about to begin. They brought him to the center of the chamber. Hyun struggled against his guards, shouting that the evidence was fabricated, that this was murder. But his voice was lost in the chaos. High Arbiter Quill spoke the formal words of execution. Its crystalline body pulsed with light, a sign of deep regret. The ancient being had seen many executions over its long life, but this one troubled it. Something felt wrong, but the law was clear. Jiho was given a chance to speak his final words. Every execution was broadcast across the galaxy, and the condemned were allowed this last dignity. He looked directly into the camera, knowing his words would reach Earth. "Remember Protocol Omega," he said quietly. Then the energy beam struck him, and Ambassador Jiho Park ceased to exist. Hyun screamed. The sound was raw and broken, filled with grief and rage. He was dragged from the chamber, still fighting, still trying to tell anyone who would listen that this was a lie, a setup, a murder disguised as justice. The broadcast ended. The council chamber slowly emptied, and across the galaxy on a small blue planet orbiting an average yellow star, Jiho's final words were received and understood. Earth had just lost its voice. Now it would make itself heard in a very different way. The emergency session began exactly 17 minutes after Jiho's execution was broadcast. Every major leader on Earth was present, either physically in the Geneva Command Center or via secure holographic link. The room was silent except for the sound of shocked breathing and barely controlled anger. President Yoonji Choi sat at the head of the table, her face carved from stone. She had been a peace advocate her entire political career, had fought against military expansion, had believed that humanity's future lay in diplomacy and cooperation. She had appointed Jiho personally, trusted him completely, and now she had watched him die on a screen, murdered by the very council he had devoted his life to serving. Admiral Minho Kang stood near the wall, his military uniform crisp and perfect despite the late hour. He was 60 years old, a veteran of the colony wars when human settlements had fought each other before the council had forced unity upon them. His face showed no emotion, but his hands were clenched into fists. Dr. Sumi Han sat across from the president, tears streaming down her face. She had been Jiho's mentor, had trained him in the art of xenodiplomacy, had believed that words could build bridges between species. She had been wrong. Her student was dead and words had failed. General Taejin Yoon was pacing like a caged animal. As head of the Strategic Weapons Division, He had spent 15 years preparing for a moment he had hoped would never come. Now that moment was here, and his expression mixed grief with something darker. Something that looked almost like satisfaction that he had been proven right. The president spoke first. Her voice was steady, but everyone in the room could hear the fury beneath it. "Someone tell me what Protocol Omega means." Dr. Sumi wiped her eyes and looked up. It was a code phrase we established when Jiho first joined the diplomatic corps. A contingency plan. If he ever said those words, it meant the galactic community had become an existential threat to humanity. It meant diplomacy had failed completely. It meant we needed to defend ourselves by any means necessary. "Any means?" the president repeated. General Tajin stopped pacing. "May I speak freely, Madam President?" "I think we're past formality, General. 15 years ago, when we joined the Council, some of us argued that we were making ourselves vulnerable. We said that we needed insurance, a deterrent, something to ensure that the galaxy would never see us as prey. You and others believed that building such weapons would undermine trust. So we reached a compromise." The president's eyes widened. "What kind of compromise?" Admiral Minho stepped forward. "We built the weapons anyway, in secret. Hidden facilities throughout the solar system. Construction disguised as mining operations, scientific research, commercial ventures. We called it Project Omega. The Annihilation Fleet." The room exploded. Representatives shouted questions, accusations, demands for explanations. The president raised her hand, and slowly the chaos subsided. "How many people knew about this?" she asked quietly. "Fewer than 100, Minho replied. "All military, all sworn to absolute secrecy." Jiho knew, he approved. He said if humanity ever needed these weapons, he would give the signal. That signal was Protocol Omega. Dr. Sumi nodded. Jiho believed in peace, but he wasn't naive. He knew the galaxy was dangerous. He knew that respect sometimes requires the ability to destroy those who would destroy you. He just hoped we would never need to prove it. The president closed her eyes. When she opened them again, everyone in the room could see the change. The peace advocate was gone. In her place sat a leader ready to do terrible things to protect her people. "Show me the fleet," she said. The holographic displays activated. Images filled the room, showing vessels that dwarfed anything humanity had previously built. Ships that looked like they belonged in nightmares covered in weapons that bent the laws of physics. Thousands of them, hidden in the shadows of moons, in the rings of Saturn, in the frozen darkness of the Kuiper Belt. "My God," someone whispered. "We've been building continuously for 15 years, General Tajin explained. "Automated construction facilities that work around the clock. We've developed technologies that the galaxy has never seen. Quantum displacement drives that can move a ship across light years in minutes. Singularity weapons that can tear holes in space-time itself. Nanoswarm defenses that can repair damage faster than it's inflicted." "How many ships?" the president asked. 3,742, Minho replied. "Each one capable of fighting an entire fleet by itself. Together they represent more firepower than the entire Galactic Council Navy combined." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Humanity, the newest and supposedly weakest member of the galactic community, had secretly become its most powerful military force. "There's more," Minho continued. "Our intelligence has intercepted Dominion communications. They're mobilizing their fleets. They plan to attack our colonies within the next 72 hours. Vexthar sold the execution to his allies as the opening move in a war to eliminate the human threat, before it could grow stronger." Dr. Sumi laughed bitterly. "They created the very threat they feared. If they had just accepted our trade proposal, if they had let Jiho live, none of this would be happening. But they chose murder. They chose war." The president looked around the room. "I need a vote from the Security Council. Do we activate Protocol Omega? Do we deploy the Annihilation Fleet?" One by one, the votes came in. The Chinese premier voted yes. The European commissioner voted yes. The African Union representative voted yes. The American secretary voted yes. Every member of Earth's unified government voted the same way. For the first time in human history, the entire planet was in complete agreement. "It's unanimous," the president said. "Admiral Kang, you have authorization to activate Protocol Omega. General Yun, prepare all defensive systems. Dr. Han, you will attempt to contact the Galactic Council one final time. If they refuse to communicate, if they threaten our colonies, if they continue this aggression..." She paused, the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Then we show them what happens when you silence humanity's voice." Admiral Minho saluted and left the room immediately. Within minutes, secure channels opened across the solar system. Authorization codes were transmitted. Encrypted orders were received and confirmed. On the far side of Earth's moon in the Tycho crater, massive doors that had been sealed for 15 years began to open. Minho stood in the control center, watching as the first ships of the Annihilation fleet emerged from their hidden hangar. They were beautiful in a terrible way, sleek and deadly, painted in the deep black of space itself. More facilities activated. On Mars beneath the polar ice caps, on Europa in the deep oceans under the frozen surface, in the asteroid belt disguised as mining operations, throughout the Kuiper belt, where human sensors could detect approaching threats from any direction. The ships emerged like a swarm, thousands of them, converging on rally points throughout the system. They moved in perfect formation, their quantum drives leaving no exhaust trail, no energy signature. They were ghosts in the darkness, invisible until they chose to be seen. Minho opened a channel to Earth. "Madam President, the Annihilation fleet is fully operational. We are ready to deploy." On Earth, President Yunji stood in the broadcast center. Before her was a camera that would transmit her message to the Galactic Council. She had written and rewritten her speech a dozen times. In the end, she kept it simple. "People of the galaxy, this is President Yunji Choi of Earth. You executed our ambassador. You murdered a man of peace who came to you in good faith. You did this based on lies, on fabricated evidence, on fear and prejudice. We have tried to contact you. You have refused all communication. Your fleets are moving against our colonies. You have given us no choice." She paused, letting the words sink in across the galaxy. "You executed our voice. Now hear our answer." The transmission ended, and across the solar system, the Annihilation fleet began its journey to the stars. Their destination was Viridian Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council. Humanity had tried peace. Now they would try something else. Captain Do-Hyun Chai stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, humanity's flagship, and watched the fleet assemble around Jupiter's orbit. He had commanded this ship for 5 years, but until 3 days ago, fewer than 100 people had known it existed. Now the entire galaxy was about to learn what humanity had built in secret. The Indomitable was 5 kilometers long, shaped like a sword thrust into the darkness. Its hull was black as night, covered in materials that absorbed sensor scans and radar. Hundreds of weapon ports lined its surface, each capable of firing projectiles that could crack a planet's crust. At its core was a singularity generator, a controlled black hole that powered the ship's impossible systems. Around the flagship, 3,000 more ships took their positions. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and dreadnoughts, each one a masterpiece of human engineering. Each one built with a single purpose: to ensure that humanity would never be helpless again. Commander Ji-won Kim flew her fighter in a patrol pattern around the fleet. She was the best pilot in the human navy, with reflexes enhanced by neural implants and a kill count from the colony wars that most people thought was exaggerated. It wasn't. She had lost her brother to a pirate attack 15 years ago, before the Council had brought order to human space. Now she had lost Ambassador Jiho, a man she had never met but whose death made her blood boil. In the Indomitable's engineering section, Sung-ho Bae monitored the quantum weapons systems. He was young for a chief engineer, only 32, but he had been designing these weapons since he was a graduate student. The mathematics behind them were beautiful and terrifying. They manipulated the fabric of reality itself, creating localized distortions in space-time that could tear a ship apart at the molecular level. "All ships reporting ready." "Captain," said the tactical officer. Do-Hyun nodded. "Activate quantum displacement drives. Destination, Viridian Prime. The galaxy is about to learn a lesson." The fleet vanished. One moment they were orbiting Jupiter, the next they were gone, transported across light years in the blink of an eye. The quantum drives didn't move the ships through space. They moved space around the ships. It was technology that shouldn't exist according to the galaxy's known physics. But humanity had never been very good at following rules about what was possible. They emerged at the edge of the Viridian system. Alarms immediately sounded across the Galactic Council's defense network. 500 warships moved to intercept, a combined force from a dozen different species. It was the largest military response the Council had assembled in 50 years. The Council Fleet Commander, An insectoid being called Skrill transmitted a warning. Human vessels, you are in violation of galactic law. You have entered Council space with military forces. Stand down immediately or be destroyed. Captain Do-hyun opened a channel. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Commander Skrill, we have no quarrel with you or your crews. We demand only one thing: return to diplomatic negotiations. Surrender those responsible for Ambassador Jiho's murder. Disband the current council leadership and allow for fair elections. Accept these terms, and we will leave peacefully. Skrill's laughter came through the speakers, a chittering sound like breaking glass. You are outnumbered 500 to 1, human. Your ships may be advanced, but you cannot possibly believe you can defeat the combined might of the Galactic Navy. I will give you one chance to retreat before we open fire. Do-hyun looked at his tactical officer. Record this moment. I want the galaxy to know we tried to avoid bloodshed. I want them to know the Council fired first. The Council fleet opened fire. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and kinetic missiles filled the space between the two forces. It was enough firepower to glass a planet. The weapons crossed the distance in seconds, striking the Annihilation fleet with the full force of galactic military power. The human ships didn't even scratch. Their nanoswarm defenses activated. Billions of microscopic machines forming a shield that absorbed or deflected every attack. The energy weapons were captured and stored. The physical projectiles were disassembled before impact, their atoms scattered harmlessly into space. Our turn, Do-hyun said quietly. The Indomitable fired first. A single shot from its main gun. A concentrated beam of twisted space-time. The beam touched a Council dreadnought and the ship simply ceased to exist. It didn't explode. It didn't break apart. It was there one moment and gone the next, erased from reality as thoroughly as if it had never been built. The rest of the Annihilation fleet opened fire. The space around Viridian Prime became a light show of destruction. Human weapons operated on principles the galaxy didn't understand. Some created micro-black holes that swallowed enemy ships whole. Others fired projectiles that phased through shields and hulls, exploding inside vessels from within. Still others released swarms of nanomachines that consumed ships like acid, breaking them down into their component atoms. Commander Ji-won led her fighter wing against the Council's smaller craft. Her squadron of 50 fighters engaged 300 enemy vessels. It should have been a massacre. It was, but not the way the Council expected. The human fighters were faster, more maneuverable, equipped with weapons that tracked targets through multiple dimensions. Within minutes, 200 Council fighters were destroyed. The rest retreated in panic. Sung-ho watched his weapon systems perform exactly as designed. The quantum torpedoes were particularly effective, each one creating a bubble of altered physics where the normal laws of reality didn't apply. Ships caught in these bubbles experienced time differently than the space around them. Some aged thousands of years in seconds, their hulls corroding to dust. Others were frozen in time, becoming statues in space. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, the Council fleet was gone. 493 ships destroyed. 7 ships escaped, fleeing at maximum speed. Not a single human vessel was even damaged. Captain Do-hyun stood on his bridge looking at the tactical display. He felt no joy in the victory, only a deep sadness that it had come to this. He had been a merchant captain before joining the military. He had believed in trade, cooperation, mutual benefit. He had believed in Jiho's vision of a peaceful humanity among the stars. "Get me Admiral Kang," he said. The connection was established. "Sir, the Council fleet is destroyed. We have a clear path to Viridian Prime. Requesting orders." Admiral Minho's face appeared on the screen. He looked older than he had 3 days ago, the weight of command pressing down on him. "Take position in orbit. Prepare for planetary siege. But Do-hyun, listen carefully. We are not monsters. We will not bombard civilian populations. We will not become the very thing we're fighting against. Understood, sir." The Annihilation fleet moved into orbit around Viridian Prime. 3,000 ships surrounded the Council's capital world, their weapons pointed down at the planet's surface. It was the most threatening military position in recorded galactic history. Do-hyun opened a channel that broadcast on every frequency, to every receiver on the planet below. "People of Viridian Prime, this is Captain Do-hyun Che of the United Earth Fleet. We have no desire to harm civilians. We demand only justice. Surrender those responsible for Ambassador Jiho's murder. Disband the current council. Allow for fair elections and transparent government. You have 24 hours to comply. If you refuse, we will take the council station by force. Choose wisely. On the planet below, chaos erupted. The council members who had voted for Jiho's execution now faced the consequences of their decision. Some called for immediate surrender. Others wanted to fight to the last. Still others tried to flee, hoping to escape before humanity's patience ran out. In secret, a message was transmitted from the planet to the Indomitable. It came from Counselor Prex, one of the avian representatives who had abstained from the vote. The message contained files, documents, recordings, evidence that Jiho's execution had been planned months in advance. Proof that Vexthar and his allies had fabricated everything. Do-hyun forwarded the information to Earth immediately. Dr. Sumi-Han received it with grim satisfaction. She had suspected the truth, but seeing the proof made her anger burn even hotter. The 24 hours began to count down. The galaxy watched and waited, wondering if humanity would really bombard a planet, wondering if the humans were bluffing, wondering what kind of species had been hiding among them all this time. They would have their answer soon enough. 20 hours into the ultimatum, the council remained paralyzed with indecision. In the underground tunnels beneath Viridian Prime's capital city, a different kind of meeting was taking place. Unisong led 30 beings through the maintenance corridors, moving quickly and quietly. They were rebels, resistance fighters who had opposed the council's corruption for years. Now with human warships overhead, they finally had a chance to make real change. Una was human, one of the few who lived permanently off Earth, helping to run a trade station near council space. She was 40 years old, scarred from a dozen fights with council security forces. She had been fighting this war for a decade, trying to expose the lies and manipulation that kept the council in power. No one had listened. Until now. The evidence is in the central archives, she told her team. We need to get it before Vexthar destroys it. The galaxy needs to know the truth about what really happened to Ambassador Jiho. Among her team were members of 6 different species, all united by their hatred of the council's authoritarian rule. There was Krill, an insectoid similar to Commander Skrill but fighting on the opposite side. There was Mora, a crystalline being like High Arbiter Quill but younger and angrier. There were others, representing civilizations that had suffered under the council's control. Above them, on the council station, a different drama was unfolding. Counselor Vexthar paced in his private chambers watching the human fleet through his viewport. His plan had failed spectacularly. He had thought executing Jiho would unite the galaxy against humanity, would justify the Dominion's expansion into human territory. Instead, he had awakened something terrible. His mate, Sira, watched him with growing horror. She had always known her husband was ambitious, but she had never realized he was capable of murder. The evidence Counselor Prex had leaked was spreading through the underground networks. Soon everyone would know what Vexthar had done. You need to surrender, she told him. You need to turn yourself in before they destroy everything. Vexthar spun on her, his eyes blazing. Surrender to humans? They are prey species, Sira. They should be grateful we allowed them into the council at all. This is their fault for reaching above their station. Their station? Sira gestured toward the viewport where thousands of human ships surrounded the planet. Look at them, husband. They are not prey. They never were. We made them into predators by trying to destroy them. On Earth, President Yoonji sat in her office, unable to sleep. She had authorized the deployment of the most powerful military force in galactic history. She had threatened to attack a planet with billions of innocent civilians. And for what? Justice? Revenge? Could she really live with herself if she gave the order to attack? Dr. Sumi entered without knocking. Madam President, we've received more intelligence from Counselor Prex. The council is fracturing. Half of them want to surrender the conspirators. The other half wants to maintain authority at any cost. Vexthar is planning a coup. He's trying to seize control of the council's defense systems. Admiral Minho joined them via hologram. If Vexthar controls the defense grid, he could kill millions of civilians on Viridian Prime. He'll blame us for the deaths. Turn the entire galaxy against humanity. How long until he succeeds? The president asked. Hours at most, Minho replied. Then we need to act now, Yoonji said. Not with orbital bombardment. With precision. Can we take the council station without destroying the planet? Minho smiled grimly. I have just the person for that job. Commander Hajun Nam was a Marine, trained in close combat and zero-gravity warfare. He had been preparing for this mission since the fleet deployed, hoping he would get the chance to make the Council pay for Jiho's murder. Now, with 4 hours left on the ultimatum, he was leading 500 Marines on the most dangerous assault in human history. They launched from the Indomitable in small, stealthy dropships. The vessels were coated in the same sensor-absorbing materials as the fleet, making them nearly invisible. They approached the Council station from multiple angles, timing their approach to avoid the automated defense systems. Counselor Prex had provided them with access codes and station layouts. The avian diplomat had risked everything to help humanity, motivated by his own disgust at how Jiho had been treated. His information was perfect. The Marines breached the station without raising alarms. Inside, they moved like ghosts. Their armor was equipped with active camouflage that bent light around them, making them nearly invisible. They carried weapons designed for ship combat, firing projectiles that wouldn't puncture hulls but would incapacitate targets instantly. They encountered their first resistance near the Council chambers. Dominion security forces, heavily armed and expecting trouble. The firefight was brief and brutal. The Marines used tactics learned from decades of combat experience. They flanked, they maneuvered, they overwhelmed. Within minutes, the Dominion forces were neutralized. Hajun led his team directly to Vexthar's location. The reptilian counselor had barricaded himself in the station's control center, surrounded by loyal guards. He had his hand on the defense grid controls, ready to activate the planetary weapons that would kill millions of his own people just to maintain power. Counselor Vexthar, Hajun spoke through the external speakers. You have one chance to surrender. Come out peacefully and you will face trial. Resist and we will come in. Vexthar's response was to activate the defense grid. Alarms blared across the planet as weapon systems powered up, but nothing happened. The systems had been locked out remotely by Sungho Bay, whose technical skills had disabled the grid minutes before Vexthar could use it. Breach, Hajun ordered. The Marines blew the doors. Flashbangs filled the control room with light and noise. The guards were disoriented, unable to fight back effectively. Within seconds, they were restrained. Vexthar himself tried to fight, his reptilian strength making him dangerous even unarmed. But he was 1 against 500 and the outcome was never in doubt. They dragged him out of the control center in restraints. Other Marines were rounding up the other conspirators, 17 council members in total who had participated in the plot against Jiho. They were transported to the Indomitable, where they would be held until proper trials could be arranged. Simultaneously, Yuna's resistance team reached the archives. They found what they were looking for, the original recordings of the planning sessions where Vexthar and his allies had discussed framing humanity. The fabricated evidence, complete with timestamps showing it was created weeks before Jiho's mission. Communications between Dominion agents and corrupt council members. Yuna transmitted everything to Captain Do-hyun, who immediately broadcasted across the galaxy. Every species, every world, every citizen with access to communications received the truth. Jiho had been innocent. The evidence against him was fake. His execution had been a political assassination, designed to justify aggression against humanity. The galaxy's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of species issued statements condemning the Council. 3 civilizations recalled their representatives entirely. Public protests erupted on Council worlds, with civilians demanding reform and justice. On Viridian Prime, the remaining Council members, those not implicated in the conspiracy, held an emergency session. High Arbiter Quill, whose crystalline body pulsed with shame and anger, took control. The old council is dissolved, the ancient being declared. We will hold new elections. Fair elections. Transparent elections. We will rebuild trust with all species, including humanity. This corruption ends now. President Yoonji received the news with relief so intense it made her weak. She had been prepared to follow through on her threat, had been ready to order the attack despite knowing it would haunt her forever. Now she didn't have to. Justice would be served without more bloodshed. Admiral Minho recalled Commander Hajun and his Marines. They returned to the Indomitable with their prisoners, having completed the mission without a single civilian casualty. It was a victory, but it tasted bitter. Jiho was still dead. Nothing could change that. Captain Do-hyun addressed the fleet. Stand down from combat status. Maintain orbital position until the situation stabilizes, but power down weapons. We've made our point. Now let's see if the galaxy learns the lesson. The Annihilation fleet remained in orbit, a reminder of humanity's power. But they were no longer pointed at the planet like loaded guns. They were simply there waiting, watching. The price of justice had been paid, but the cost was higher than anyone had imagined. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again, and humanity would never see itself the same way either. They had wanted respect. They had gotten fear. Whether that was better or worse remained to be seen. 6 months had passed since the siege of Viridian Prime. The galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and profound, and nowhere was that change more visible than in the neutral station where the war crimes trials were being held. The station orbited no particular world, located in empty space between star systems. It had been built specifically for these proceedings, funded jointly by dozens of species who wanted to see justice done properly. The courtroom was vast, designed to accommodate representatives from every galactic civilization. At its center stood a single cage of transparent energy, and inside that cage sat Vexithar and his 17 co-conspirators. The trials had been broadcast continuously for 3 months. Every species watched as evidence was presented, witnesses testified, and the full scope of the conspiracy was revealed. It went deeper than anyone had imagined. The plot against Jiho had been just one part of a larger plan to centralize power in the Council, eliminate dissent, and maintain control over the galaxy through fear and manipulation. High Arbiter Quill served as chief judge, though the ancient being looked diminished now, its crystalline body dimmer than before. It had failed in its duty to ensure justice, and the shame of that failure would never leave it. But it was determined to get this right. On the final day of testimony, Hajin Park took the stand. He was Jiho's son, 30 years old, a teacher on Earth who had never wanted anything to do with politics or diplomacy. But his father's death had changed him, had forced him to understand the larger forces at work in the galaxy. "Tell us about your father," Quill said gently. Hajin spoke clearly, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. "My father believed in peace. He believed that different species could work together, could solve problems through conversation instead of violence. He spent his entire career trying to build bridges between worlds, and he was murdered for it by people who saw that peace as a threat to their power." He looked directly at Vexthar, who refused to meet his eyes. "My father's death accomplished nothing except to show the galaxy what happens when fear and prejudice replace justice and reason." The conspirators wanted to eliminate the human threat. Instead, they created it. They proved that the Council couldn't be trusted, that words alone weren't enough to keep humanity safe. They forced us to show our weapons, to become the very thing they claimed to fear. Hajin paused, collecting his thoughts. But here's what they never understood. My father knew about the Annihilation fleet. He approved its construction. He wasn't naive. He knew humanity needed the capability to defend itself. But he also knew that having weapons and using them are two different things. He believed we could be strong enough to protect ourselves and wise enough to choose peace whenever possible. He died trying to prove that belief. The courtroom was silent. Every being present felt the weight of those words. The verdicts came the next day. Guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit murder, fabrication of evidence, abuse of authority, crimes against galactic peace. The punishments were severe. Life imprisonment in isolated facilities, stripped of all rank and privilege. Their names to be remembered in history as examples of corruption and injustice. But notably, not execution. President Yunji had insisted on that. "We will not lower ourselves to their level," she had told the assembled judges. "They murdered our ambassador. We will imprison them. That's the difference between justice and revenge." The Reformed Galactic Assembly, as it was now called, held its first official session 1 week after the trials concluded. The changes were dramatic. The Assembly's charter included term limits, transparent voting records, independent oversight committees, and democratic elections for all positions. No single species could dominate the proceedings. No faction could fabricate evidence or abuse authority without immediate consequences. Dr. Sumi Han was appointed as Earth's new senior ambassador. She stood before the assembly, older now and marked by grief but still committed to the work her student had begun. "Humanity joins this new assembly with hope," she said. "Hope that the mistakes of the past have taught us all valuable lessons. Hope that we can build something better together." She paused, looking around at the representatives from dozens of worlds. But let me be clear.
Humanity has shown you our weapons.
They still exist. They will always exist. Not because we want war, but because we have learned that peace without the means to defend it is just a beautiful dream, waiting to become a nightmare. We hope to never use those weapons again, but they remain a promise and a warning. Treat us fairly and we will be your strongest allies. Threaten us, and you will face consequences that no one wants to imagine. The Assembly voted to give Earth a permanent seat on the Security Council. The motion passed with overwhelming support. Some species voted yes out of respect for humanity's restraint during the crisis. Others voted yes out of fear of what would happen if they voted no. Either way, humanity's position in the galaxy was secure. The Annihilation fleet did not disband. Admiral Minho, who had announced his retirement, was convinced to stay on for another 5 years to oversee the fleet's reorganization. It would no longer be hidden. The ships would operate openly, conducting patrols, responding to distress calls, and maintaining order in regions where the Assembly's authority was weak. Captain Do-hyun became the fleet's new supreme commander, promoted over several more senior officers because of his measured response during the crisis. He established strict rules of engagement, ensuring that human weapons would only be used in defense or in support of Assembly operations. The fleet became what Admiral Minho had always intended, not a tool of conquest, but a guarantee of security. Commander Ji-won established a joint military academy on Mars, where humans and aliens trained together. The first class included recruits from 20 different species, all learning to work as a unified force. Some of them had fought against each other during the crisis. Now they were learning to fight together. Unisong's resistance movement transformed into a legitimate political organization, the Reform Coalition. It operated across the galaxy, monitoring the Assembly for signs of corruption and advocating for transparency and accountability. Yuna herself was elected to represent the independent colonies, becoming one of the Assembly's most vocal members. Hajin Park joined the diplomatic corps, following his father's path despite the pain it caused him. "My father died believing in this work," he told Dr. Sumi when he applied. "I need to prove he was right. I need to show that his death meant something. On Earth, memorials were built in Jiho's honor. Schools were named after him. His speeches were studied by diplomats across the galaxy. He became a symbol of the cost of justice, the price of peace, and the courage required to pursue diplomacy even in the face of danger." 1 year after Jiho's execution, a ceremony was held at the new assembly station. A memorial wall was unveiled, bearing the names of all who had died in service to galactic peace. Jiho's name was carved first, larger than the others, with his final words inscribed below. "Remember Protocol Omega." But beneath those words, the assembly had added a new inscription. "The price of peace is eternal vigilance. The cost of justice sometimes requires the threat of annihilation. We pray we never pay that cost again." Dr. Sumi stood before the memorial, placing a white flower at its base. Behind her, visible through the massive viewport, the Annihilation fleet maintained its vigil. Thousands of ships arranged in formation, a constellation of humanity's resolve and restraint. The galaxy had learned what happens when humanity's voice is silenced. They had seen the weapons humanity had built in secret. They had witnessed the destruction those weapons could cause. But more importantly, they had seen humanity choose mercy when revenge would have been easier. They had seen strength tempered by wisdom, power restrained by principle. Some species respected humanity for it. Others feared them. Many felt both emotions simultaneously. But no one would ever again make the mistake of seeing humans as weak or helpless. No one would ever again think that humanity could be threatened without consequence. The Annihilation fleet remained on patrol, its quantum drives ready to transport ships across light years in moments. Its weapons remained charged, capable of tearing holes in reality itself. Its crews remained trained and alert, prepared to defend humanity and its allies against any threat. But more days passed without those weapons being fired than with them. More negotiations succeeded than failed. More treaties were signed than broken. The fleet's mere existence, the knowledge that humanity could destroy but chose not to, became the foundation of a new kind of peace. It was a peace built on respect rather than weakness, on demonstrated capability rather than empty threats. It was a peace that acknowledged the darkness in the galaxy, while refusing to be consumed by it. It was a fragile thing, requiring constant attention and care. But it was real, and for now it was enough. Hajin stood beside Dr. Sumi at the memorial, looking at his father's name carved into the wall. "Do you think he would be proud?" he asked quietly. "Of what we became? Of what we did?" Dr. Sumi was quiet for a long moment. "Your father believed that humanity's greatest strength wasn't our weapons or our technology. It was our ability to change, to adapt, to become whatever we needed to be to survive. We became warriors because we had to. But we remained human, held on to our principles, chose mercy when we could have chosen destruction. Yes, Hajin, I think he would be very proud." They stood together in silence, remembering the man who had tried to save the galaxy through words and had ended up changing it through his death. The memorial lights cast long shadows across the station floor, and through the viewport, the Annihilation fleet sailed through the darkness, guardians of a peace that had been bought with blood and sustained by the promise of overwhelming force. The galaxy was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better than it had been, and humanity had ensured it would never return to what it was before. The Council's age of corruption was over. A new age had begun, built on the ashes of the old and the determination to do better. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Annihilation fleet kept watch, ready but hoping to never be needed again.